Excellent. Good evening, everyone. One of the things that we had mentioned a couple of weeks ago is we were going to invite Mr. Mark Zittimer, our board attorney, to one of our board meetings to do a brief presentation on HIB, which is one of the responsibilities of the board to understand, and the second was the Ethics Act. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Zittimer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Schoen, members of the administration, members of the board. Thank you for having me here this evening. As Dr. Schoen pointed out, we are required annually to do some training for the Board of Education on two subjects. One is harassment, intimidation, and bullying in the law, often referred to as HIB, as well as the New Jersey School Ethics. And I apologize to the board, to the public, for having my back a little bit to you. I know we've allocated about a half an hour, but if you have questions along the way, feel free to chime in and ask me whatever's on your mind. And so with that said, let's get started. We're going to first start by talking a little bit about the harassment, intimidation, and bullying law. And I'm sure you've all read a lot about this law over the years. It's probably described in New Jersey as one of the toughest laws in the nation on harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And I would say it's tough for a variety of different reasons. It's tough because of its zero-tolerance approach to harassment, intimidation, and bullying. It's tough because the law's theme now is prevention, not reaction. It's not how you react in a situation where you have HIB in your school environment, but more importantly, what are you doing to prevent it in the first place? It's also a complicated law in the sense that these cases often involve multiple victims, multiple aggressors, so they don't fit nicely into these neat little packages, if you will, where they're often easy to investigate. To the contrary, they're often very difficult to investigate. You'll find situations where the bully is the victim, and the victim is the bully. So these are, again, not easy cases. And they also monopolize a significant amount of administrative time and energy, again, which is a good thing if we're accomplishing what our policy says, which is to prevent the HIB from occurring in the school district in the first place. So our policy, the preamble, says that a Board of Education prohibits HIB. A safe and civil environment in school is necessary for pupils to learn and achieve high academic standards. Harassment, intimidation, or bullying, like other disruptive or violent behaviors, is conduct that disrupts both a student's ability to learn and a school's ability to educate its pupils in a safe environment and disciplined environment. And I recommend for all the board members, if you haven't had a chance, check out our policy on the website. It's a very, very comprehensive policy. It's about 24 pages long. Obviously, you don't have to memorize it, but you should certainly be familiar with it. It's front and center right on our website as the law requires. So let's talk about what the definition of HIB is. And the legislature, with all due respect, came up with a definition that in my view is very, very complicated, very hard to understand. So what I tried doing for you here this evening is trying to break it down a little bit into some parts so that we can understand what they were trying to get at. So what is HIB? By law, it's a gesture, written, verbal, or physical act, or an electronic communication, and we'll talk a little bit about what electronic communication means. How often? It could be a single incident of HIB, or it could be a series of incidents, a pattern. What does it have to be motivated? Under the law, HIB has to be motivated by something. So it's got to be motivated by an actual or a perceived characteristic. An actual characteristic, a student is in a wheelchair. You're bullying that student because of a disability. A perceived characteristic may be something you perceive the student to be. If I'm wearing a pink shirt and you perceive tonight that I'm gay, perceiving somebody to be a member of a protected class is enough to be entitled to the protections of the law. It's got to be based on a characteristic: race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, sexual orientation, and other characteristics. And then you've got the catch-all at the end, or by any other distinguishing characteristic, which when the law came out, I knew that made people's heads spin a little bit. What does other distinguishing characteristic mean? And so we know based on the case law that other distinguishing characteristics could be something as simple as a student having freckles, red hair. There was a case before the commissioner where a student had head lice. That was considered to be an other distinguishing characteristic. So it's a very broad catch-all. Where and when? It takes place on school property, at a school-sponsored function, or on a school bus on school grounds. By the way, the parentheticals, I hope you understand in caps, those are my additions. That's not in the actual law itself. That's the way I broke it down for you. And then finally does what? It substantially disrupts or interferes with the orderly operation of school or the rights of other students. And then they went further. It's got to meet one of 4 additional criteria. And this point A looks at it from the perspective of the bully, so that a reasonable person should know under the circumstances will have the effect of physically or emotionally harming a student, or damaging the student's property, or placing the student in reasonable fear of physical or emotional harm to his person or damage to his property. B looks at it from the perspective of the bully, and this is an or, by the way, so it's got to meet one of these criteria. It actually has the effect of insulting or demeaning any student or group of students in such a way as to cause disruption in or interference with the orderly operation of the school, or C, creates a hostile educational environment at school for the student, or lastly, D, infringes on the rights of the student at school by interfering with the student's education or by severely or pervasively causing physical or emotional harm to the student. I told you this was a complicated definition. I've read this definition many times, and I still have to think about it when I'm presented with a case to see whether, in my opinion, something meets this definition or not. They could have simplified it. Unfortunately, they didn't. So that's what New Jersey defines HIB to be. The important part about this definition, in my view, is that it's got to be based on one of these characteristics. So, what you might think in your mind is bullying may simply be a student code of conduct violation. It may not fall into the actual definition of HIB. That's not to say it shouldn't be investigated, it shouldn't be looked at, but it may not, at the end of the day, meet our statutory and policy definition of what is HIB. Sir?
Yeah, you referenced case several times now. When does it go from investigation to where it makes it a case where you're in front of?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll get to that a little bit, but parent who feels that the determination of the administration was incorrect on an HIB case has a right to present the appeal to the Board of Education. The board hears the case, and the board either says we affirm the administration's decision that this was or was not HIB, or we reverse or modify or send it back for further findings. If the parent is ultimately not satisfied with that, they have a right to appeal to the Commissioner of Education. So when I was talking about cases, I'm talking about cases that are actually heard by the Commissioner of Education. The Commissioner doesn't hear cases himself, he assigns them to an administrative law judge. So that's where you will find the case law elaborating on some of the points that I've made here tonight. Okay. So we now have cyberbullying. In the year 2016, a lot of bullying, as you know, is not occurring face-to-face. It's occurring through Twitter and instant messaging and chatting and tweeting and all these other things that students like to do. And we refer to that as cyberbullying. So before, in the policy, when we talked about electronic communications, we're really referring to bullying that takes place electronically. And of course, districts have a right to deal with cyberbullying, even when it occurs off campus. And I always like to advise my clients, there still has to be some nexus to the school district in order for us to take action. Again, we have a separate policy dealing with cyberbullying, which is referenced there in the PowerPoint. So what are the reporting obligations? Anybody, including board member, who has witnessed or has reliable information that a student's been subject to HIB, shall report the incident to the anti-bullying specialist or to any school administrator or safe school resource officer, who shall immediately initiate the school's HIB reporting procedures. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Ms. Rizzo is the district's HIB coordinator. Wave, Ms. Rizzo, say hello. Yes. So she's the coordinator. It's her responsibility to oversee the policy and all of the HIB plans and procedures that we have in place in the Mahwah School District. There's immunity for reporting. And so what does this mean? That if a board member reports HIB, a staff member reports HIB in good faith, you are immune if ultimately the situation is not remedied. So it's basically encouraging folks to come forward and make these reports. And you shouldn't have to fear that if you do, even if you're incorrect, that you will somehow be held liable, because there is immunity under the law, and I thought it was important to mention that to you as board members. The investigation, once started, has to be completed by the specialist as soon as possible, but not later than 10 days from the date of the report. The results get reported to the superintendent within 2 school days of the completion of the investigation. So as you see now, these are very strict and tight timelines under this policy. Before, these cases used to linger and linger and linger. Now, start to finish, 10 days. The results get reported to the Board of Education no later than the board meeting which follows the completion of the investigation, along with information on services provided, training established, or discipline imposed, or any other action taken by the superintendent. Is that this mic that's making this noise? After it's reported out to the Board of Education, it gets reported out to the parents within 5 days after the results are reported to the board. And And the parents have a right to know certain things. They have a right to know the nature of the investigation, whether we found evidence of HIB, whether discipline was imposed, and whether services were provided to address the incidence of HIV. And now this is what I was referring to earlier. Once the parents get the results of the investigation, they have a right to request a hearing before you, the Board of Education, where you will hear the case, you will hear the parents' arguments, and you have to make a determination to either affirm, reject, or modify the superintendent's decision. And like I mentioned earlier, that decision may be appealed to the Commissioner of Education, who will set it down for a hearing. That's a very complicated law boiled down to about 7 slides. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. And we can come back at the end too, just because I know we're under a tight time constraint.
I had just one question.
Certainly.
Mark.
Yes.
It was in one of the first slides.
Okay.
Where it said, where and when. It takes place on school property, at school sponsors functions, or on a school bus, or off school grounds. So
Right.
it's everywhere.
It is everywhere. It is everywhere. But you have to go back to the other slide that I was talking about more in reference to the cyberbullying bill. There still has to be some nexus to the school. So, real case, I had a situation in a district where a student created a website at home on a Saturday afternoon, and it was vote for what he called the ugliest girl in the 8th grade. And people started petitioning and balloting, and it spilled back into the school district. In those circumstances, even though he did it on a Saturday afternoon on his own time, because there was this nexus back to the school, that's what imposed an affirmative obligation on the school district to investigate and ultimately discipline the student.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, legally, what are the certain requirements for parents to report?
The law says that anyone, it's a pretty broad statute, who has reason to believe that bullying has taken place has a legal affirmative obligation to bring that forward. It's similar to our child abuse and neglect laws, which say that if anybody has reason to believe that a child is being abused or neglected, they have a legal obligation to bring it forward. So it imposes a very strong obligation, not only as you as board members, administrators, and staff, but members of the community as well, to bring that forward and report it. Yeah.
Have cases, this is really to you, Lauren, about HIB cases that didn't turn out to be HIB, have many of them turned into student code of conduct violations?
I would say more now than when the law originally came out, and I think every district went through this, Mike. When the law came out, everyone was calling everything bullying. So if you look at our stats, Lisa, and correct me if I'm wrong, during the first couple of years, everything was bullying. And the principals were learning about the law, and the attorneys were getting a bunch of different phone calls. I think what we're finding out now is more times than not, it's a student code of conduct issue, and when it's not, it has pretty much been really clear to the administrators. They call Lisa just to confirm, but it's pretty clear. But most at this point are student code of conduct.
I completely concur with that. I remember when the law first came out, my phone was ringing off the hook from schools, 50, 60, 70 cases in the first week. And I think it's just because people didn't fully understand what the law was and what the difference between bullying under the law and code of conduct was. So,
and because there was that legal obligation to report, no one wanted to make the mistake of determining it themselves. Hence the reason that this law came out to begin with, because there were administrators saying, I don't think there's anything wrong with what's going on, and we found out later through what happened that there was. So I think there was a sensitivity.
Plus the immunity actually made things a little bit worse in the sense that people kind of over-reported because they felt that if they did, they were kind of in the clear, so to speak. Yeah. All right, I'm going to switch gears. We'll talk about the School Ethics Act now. In New Jersey, we have a School Ethics Act which governs the conduct of school officials as well as board members. The preamble to our School Ethics Act says that in our representative form of government, it's essential that the conduct of members of local boards of education and local administrators hold the respect and the confidence of the people. These officials have to avoid conduct which is in violation of the public trust or which creates a justifiable impression among the public that such trust is being violated. What does that mean? It means that board members and school officials have to avoid not only actual conflicts of interest, but you have to avoid what I like to refer to as the appearance of impropriety. If it doesn't pass the smell test, if it doesn't feel right, I always advise board members abstain, step back, recuse yourself for your own protection as well as for the protection of the school district. So again, any ambiguity, any doubt, I would always advise avoid that particular course of action. So the School Ethics Act essentially is broken down into two parts. We have the Prohibited Acts section of the Act, which deals with conflicts of interest, not voting on things where you might benefit financially, where a family member might benefit financially, where there might be some personal involvement that compromises your judgment, etc. And then we have Section 2 of the Act, which is the Code of Ethics, the Code of Ethics only applies to Board of Education members, whereas the Prohibited Acts section applies to school administrators as well. So you'll see that the Act applies to board members, employees, and officers of the New Jersey School Boards Association, and school administrators, the superintendent, the BA, and actually Mr. Fair, the assistant superintendent as well. And again, the code only applies to board members. So let me walk you through what I think are the more relevant, and it's not to say that any section is more or less relevant provisions of the Act. So board members are not to administer the schools. That's what you hired Dr. Schoen for and Mr. Fair. Their job is to administer the schools. Your role as board member is policy making, planning, and appraisal. That is the function of a board member. Setting policy for the district, planning for the future of the district, and appraising, stepping back and saying, how are we doing? What can we do better? Next point, I will recognize that authority rests with the board and make no personal promises or take private action that could compromise the board. You as board members have the authority to take action and to vote on issues when you're here at a duly convened board meeting. Outside this room, you don't have authority to take action or to investigate cases yourself, which basically says in the next section that you're supposed to also hold these matters confidential. So you'll see in the course of your board functions, you're going to come across a lot of confidential information, whether it's confidential student information, confidential personnel matters, attorney-client privileged communications about pending litigation. The law says that you have a legal obligation to keep those matters confidential. And I always tell board members that a breach of confidentiality will really undermine the functioning of the Board of Education. So when you're in closed session, if you don't have confidence that what's being said in that room is going to stay in that room, it really impedes your ability to get anything done, because everybody's going to be speaking with a guarded tongue for fear that as soon as the meeting's over, it's going to get back to the meeting, and Mrs. Smith said this about you, and Mr. Jones said this. So I really, of all the points I really want to stress tonight, please keep what you learn in the course of your closed sessions and in the papers that you receive confidential. Your spouses, friends, they're not bound by the Code of Ethics. So although you may think that you're telling them and they're going to keep it confidential, we all know it doesn't happen. So again, please try to keep it as close-knit as you should and can and must under the Code of Ethics. Section I says you're supposed to support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. Does that mean you have to rubber stamp everything the administration does? Absolutely not. But it means you have to be respectful, you have to do it in a courteous and a professional manner. And then J, referring complaints to the chief school administrator. You're at the local supermarket, and Mrs. Smith comes up to you and complains that the AP teacher of her student is giving too much homework. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll refer your complaint to Dr. Schoen, and I'm sure she'll be in touch with you to discuss it. I always refer to this section as the ability of a board member to kind of punt. It's your ability to say to the public, look, I am powerless as a board member to investigate your complaint, to handle your complaint. What I can do is, and I have to do, is refer that complaint to Dr. Schoen for redress, and that's what the Code of Ethics requires you to do. So who can file an ethics complaint? Anybody. Anybody can file an ethics complaint. A board as an entity cannot file an ethics complaint against one of its members, but individual board members could certainly sign on to the complaint, and there is a 6-month statute of limitations for filing ethics complaints, so it has to be brought within 6 months. The School Ethics Commission in New Jersey is the agency responsible for administering our School Ethics Act, and they are the only entity that can determine whether somebody's conduct violated the Ethics Act. I can certainly offer my opinions to you about whether a particular course of conduct is proper or ethical or not, but ultimately it's the School Ethics Commission that makes the final call. And if you have a question about a particular course of conduct, you can certainly write to the School Ethics Commission and they will issue an advisory opinion to you, and they'll either say thumbs up or thumbs down as to a particular course of action. If you're writing about the conduct of somebody else, the only constraint is that you have to copy that other member on that correspondence so that they have an opportunity to respond as well. So what are the sanctions for violating the Ethics Act? At the low end, you have the reprimand. A censure is a public resolution read at a board meeting, reprimanding essentially publicly that board member for particular improper, unethical conduct, a suspension, or ultimately removal from the Board of Education. Board member free speech issues. Does this all mean that you can't speak up and voice your opinion? Absolutely not. You have First Amendment rights to express your opinions on issues pertaining to the school district. The only constraint is that you can't disclose information which is inaccurate, confidential, or has the potential to compromise the board. The other thing you need to know is that on social media, on in letters that you write to newspapers, wherever it is, it's very important that when you do express your opinion, you have to identify yourself as a board member and make it very clear that these are your own personal individual opinions and that they do not necessarily represent the opinions of the entire Board of Education, so that nobody can be confused that you're speaking on behalf of the Board of Education. And social media is an area where board members oftentimes get themselves in trouble because they're commenting on Facebook and they're liking things and that sort of thing. It's important that the public not be confused that, again, you're speaking in your capacity as a board member, especially on behalf of the board. So I figured I'd make it a little bit interactive tonight. I know we're pressed for time, but we'll do this quickly. I'm going to go around the room just so nobody thinks I'm picking on them. I'm going to start with Doug for slide number 1. These are real cases, real advisory opinions. Can a board member who also writes columns for the local newspaper, let me phrase it different. A board member who also writes columns for the local newspaper should not report on Board of Education discussions or issues. This was an advisory opinion. This board member wrote for the paper and wrote a request to the School Ethics Commission saying, hey, I write for the local paper. Can I write on Board of Education issues and discussions? What do you think? A board member should not. True or false?
True.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You said Doug.
You're right. You're right.
Throw him under the bus first.
He's right.
But you
He's
said
absolutely
right.
right. I thought this was a little bit overreaching, quite frankly. I mean, if somebody's writing a column in the local paper and they want to say we had a play at the high school or we did this or that, to me, again, I think that the Ethics Commission overreached a little bit on this opinion. I mean, I understand you're certainly not going to write about closed session discussions, that's a problem, but general happenings in the district, to me, my own personal opinion, I didn't really see it as a big deal. All right, good.
And the minutes are public.
Minutes are public,
So
yeah.
then, if you were writing in, that Rob would be.
And that's why sometimes I say, be careful about requesting these advisory opinions. Because, you know, you gotta be careful what you ask for sometimes, right?
So it's almost to the point of, you shouldn't, to your point, be on Facebook doing likes to someone's comments, what happened at board meeting. Or, hey, I really liked that video this evening that was taped.
I think it's gotta be done very cautiously.
Right?
Michael, sorry. It's a violation of the act for a board member to serve as a board president and a member of the local education foundation which has as its mission the support of the school district. Is it a violation to serve as a member of the board and on the education foundation?
No.
False, you are correct. It's not a problem. The School Ethics Commission held that the two interests are not incompatible. They're actually, you know, symbiotic. Who we have to here?
Kim.
Okay. Number 3, a board member would violate the act by volunteering in the school musical in which he will assist in casting, rehearsals, lighting, etc. True. Is that a violation?
Yes, it is.
It is a violation. And the School Ethics Commission has come out with a lot of decisions lately on volunteers, because after this came out, all the board members said, I can't go into the class and read to the classroom anymore like I used to do. I can't participate in the local fundraiser. This case, there was extensive involvement with the board member and staff members, and that's why they held it was a violation. They backpedaled from this decision lately, and they said, look, one-time isolated events, going in and reading for the day or participating in the car wash, not a big deal. But when you start having a lot of interaction with staff members and you're wearing that board member hat, whether you like it or not, that's what they found problematic in this particular case. Number 4, who are we up to? A board member with a relative in the same district in which he or she is a board member may not participate in negotiations with the relative's labor union. Is that true or false? True. If it's in the same district in which you're a board member, you got to completely recuse yourself. John, number 5. A board member may not participate in negotiations with the local union when he or she is a member of the NJA in another district. So if you're in an NJA in the other district, can you participate with the NJA? True. Absolutely correct. Leslie, number 6. A board member violated NJSA 12-24.8, which is administering the schools, when he unilaterally prepared and served a rice notice on the BA without the authority of the board or the superintendent. Is that a violation? That is a violation. True. Board members should not be sending rice notices to staff members, especially your BA, because he's a good guy. We're going to go back around again. Lucky you. We got 2 more. An email discussion of board-related matter by 5 members of a 9-member board may constitute a meeting under the Sunshine Law, which would have to be advertised. Is that true?
True.
That is true. Be careful about emails. The replies to all can be a killer, because somebody's going to argue, hey, there's a meeting going on here. This should have been advertised. And then lastly, number 8, Doug. A board member violated the code of ethics when he commented on his Facebook page. Now, if we could do something about our local terrorist that destroys dreams and burns futures, and the superintendent's picture is exactly is that improper?
That's improper.
That is highly improper. Supporting and protecting school personnel. I guess that's the first board who's ever got all of my questions right.
Because I gave all the answers.
I kid you not. Did you hand this out ahead of time? Questions, comments? Well, that's ethics and that's HIB, and hopefully you got something out of it, and certainly feel free to email me, call me, whatever questions you have, I guess, through the superintendent or the board president. I'm happy to assist. So thank you for having me, and I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation.
Fabulous, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, at this moment we have agenda questions. So please limit your questions at this time to resolutions under new business on this agenda. As a matter of fairness, you are asked to limit your questions to no more than one and your remarks to no longer than 3 minutes. If you are here representing a group, please identify yourself, the group, and your position in the group. If you are here as an individual, please give us your name and address. This section of public participation will be limited to 15 minutes. Please specify the resolution you are referring to in your question. Thank you.
Evelyn Slotbarrow, 43 Thunderhead Place. I just had a question about the Mahwah High School electrical switchgear change order. And if there's an extra additional cost associated with that in addition to the contract that was already negotiated?
Yes, there is an additional cost associated with that. The additional cost was for the purpose of installing some additional lighting in certain areas that we, when the inspectors walked through, felt that additional lighting was required and needed. Emergency lighting, yes.
Okay, and what was the cost?
The cost was,
Roughly.
I'd have to look up, I apologize, I thought it was here in the motion. I'd have to look that up and get that back to you.
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't want to comment and be wrong.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Sue Dorsa, MEA President. I have a question, 16A, under the spending, the Special Revenues Fund. I just didn't know what that was, where that's going to, or how we came about with that money.
Special Revenue Fund is where we maintain our grants that we receive. So special ed grant, the ITA grants, the NCLB and title grants, that's what that fund is comprised of. The majority of the ITA money that we use to help offset out-of-district tuition that we receive. And the title money, Title I money we use in-house for eligible purposes. Title II money is often used for professional development purposes. That's all commingled together in Fund 20.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you. At this time, I'd like to have the superintendent give her report.
Sounds good. Do I need my mic? Can everybody hear me? Mike? No. We're good? All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. A big thank you to Mr. Zimmer. I really think he did a great job as far as the overview is concerned. I have a couple of things tonight. The first is, if you haven't looked at the Mahwah High School website, Mr. Pascal recently announced that senior Deanna Altamara and senior Alan Aboud have been selected as candidates to represent New Jersey for application to the U.S. Presidential Scholars Program. Deanna and Alan were chosen along with other New Jersey students on the basis of their academic and/or artistic scholarship in visual arts, the performing arts, or creative writing. Students have the opportunity to become U.S. Presidential Scholars based on 2 paths of accomplishment. The majority of the scholars that are selected on a basis of broad academic achievement. Additional students are based on academic and artistic. Each year, over 4,000 candidates are identified for academic component of this program based on having scored exceptionally well on the SAT or the ACT. Eligible students are U.S. citizens, legal permanent U.S. residents, graduating or receiving a diploma between January and August of the current year. New Jersey will select 10 student scholars in March. We wish Deanna and Alan a great deal of good luck as they participate and become part of this process, which is really an exceptional one for our students and speaks real well about their education here in Mahwah. So I wanted to acknowledge that. I would also like to, at this point, ask Ms. Zimmerman if she could, just to present an overview of where we are instructionally and from a curriculum standpoint.
Sure.
That would be great.
Good evening,
Thank you.
everybody. Just about every month, the instructional committee of the board meets. We have a regularly scheduled meeting, and the board members who are part of the instructional committee are Mr. Saldarini, Mrs. Barron has been on the committee for a year, and Mrs. Conoco just joined us for this past January meeting. Every month, it's always a very exciting opportunity for our supervisors and principals and myself to share with the instructional committee members exactly all the great things that are going on in our schools, and also the new things that we'd like to bring forward in the school district. And it goes from pre-K to 12, and the topics vary month to month. So just this past month, we talked about the ACT Science, the new curriculum. Mrs. Trebona presented that. It's a response to all of our high school students who are currently taking the ACT, and it's a short after-school ACT prep class. The supervisors and Mr. Pascal presented new courses that they would like to offer to students that'll be in the course listings for next year. Film, historical perspectives, social media marketing in business, STEM 3 capstone internship seminar, honors Chinese 4, advanced interior and structural design, mobile app design, and mindfulness, wellness, and resilience. So great courses there. We're very excited about them. The curriculum will be written moving forward. We'll have that on a board agenda soon. Some course changes and upcoming curriculum writing on the horizon. Anatomy and physiology will be revised to be a full-year course to incorporate the sports physiology course as well, and changes to the robotics and advanced robotics curricula. Those have been around for about 13 years now and have not really undergone any kind of major changes. So that's curriculum writing for that is on the horizon as well. On the next agenda, we'll have a new music theory textbook for the board's approval. And the AP Calculus textbook is undergoing textbook review. They're just about to get that started now. Mr. Pascal would like to bring in another provider of online courses. We currently have New Jersey Virtual High School. That's for students who are out for medical reasons, homeschooling, course recovery, summer school, things like that. The new program is called EduSeer, and they offer other and more extensive course listings that would possibly be of help to our students. And we also talked about some general district information. The state of New Jersey, the Department of Education has undergone a year-long, or almost a year-long now, since last spring, a review of the standards, the Common Core standards. And they're recommending that we keep them, make some updates to them, and call them the New Jersey Learning Standards. So they're minor tweaks to the Common Core. More so in language arts than in math. And that's still undergoing public input. And there are 3 sessions coming up this spring in the north, the central, and the south of the state, if anybody would like to give their input on that. The standards are all listed online. We are looking at how to best incorporate the state's requirement to teach our students computer programming, also known as coding. And we're looking at code.org. We sent our elementary librarians to training for that in the fall. They came back with some great information. It's a free curriculum. And we've also sent out to code.org for their secondary information as well. And we are sending, related to the mindfulness elective for our students, we're sending some of our administrators, 7 of us actually, to Mindful Schools Professional Development, because we'd like to bring back information about helping our students become resilient more resilient, and doing that district-wide. So lots of great things going on in the district, and we're always excited to talk to the instructional
Really is,
committee
Christine,
about that.
thank you. There is so much happening and a lot on the agenda. May I move on?
Yes, you may.
We do have a lot of police officers here this evening, so I'd like to take some time to recognize one. As I'm sure everyone is aware at this point, whether it was through the television, through the newspapers, or through 880 News, there was a pretty incredible fire in Society Hill condo complex last night. We had 2 families in our district who were affected by the fire. The principals and I have spoken to these families, the individual schools of the children are attending, as well as what we're in the process of doing is we've spoken, the principals have reached out to the families, and what we're doing, the schools are doing individual collections for families, but also the Mahwah Education Association has been grateful to how much we have here and the loss that has occurred, and they're in the process too district-wide, collecting donations as well for the family. However, during the fire last night, there was a very brave little girl and some heroic police officers, all of whom are here this evening. Sophia Doroshenko, a 9-year-old attending Joyce Kilmer School, is here with her mother and stepfather, as well as our JK principal, Dr. DeToro, in the back. Lieutenant Jeffrey Dino, Sergeant Brendan Molin, and Officer Thomas Salamano are also here with us this evening. By the way, it's important to add, they're all off duty today, so the fact that you are here today is great. Sophia really is a very, very brave young lady, having jumped 27 feet from her 3rd floor balcony into the arms of the police officers below. And to get an idea of how much that is, the measurement from this window to where the officers are sitting in the 1st row is approximately 27 feet. And what I was thinking about is, have you ever heard about that truss game before? You know, I'm going to stand here and I'll stand behind you and fall back, and you think to yourself, I'm not falling back anywhere. That just gives you a little perspective of what Sophia did. In fact, I think that Lieutenant Dino, if I may, is quoted in the record as saying, "I've never seen anything like it. The child was calm and in control. That's the bravest little kid that I've ever seen. I thought we were going to have a hard time convincing her. She put a lot of faith in us. We are so proud of you, Sophia, so very proud of you, and so grateful to Lieutenant Dino, Sergeant Molin, and Officer Salamano, who did what it took to get a little girl to believe that you would catch her and that she would be okay." I really think that's pretty amazing. Sophia, honey, what we've done is we've prepared a certificate from all of the Board of Education members. And the certificate is a certificate of bravery, and that's for you. And we say that you became the bravest little girl in the world on the 2nd of February, 2016. That's for you. We also have an organization in town called the Mahwah Municipal Alliance, and the Mahwah Municipal Alliance is made up of local police and also made up of community members who dedicate and volunteer their time to do a lot of student programs with kids. And one of the things they promote is courage among children. And I can't think of a better way for the Mahwah Municipal Alliance to acknowledge what you've done. They have provided to the family a $500 gift card for American Express so that you can begin to make your way with all you've lost. You're very welcome. And finally, to our police officers, and for those of you in the back, we always knew you were good. Yesterday, you became incredible. Thank you. Thank you. She said no. Dr. Turo, thank you for all that you organized today for the family and for reaching out last night quickly after this was done. It says a lot about our administrators and it says a lot about our teaching staff when you go out of your way to help people. And I think it's wonderful, so I'm proud to be part of this district.
I just
Thank you.
want to say thank you to everybody who helped us yesterday and today, and you personally, thank you. Thank you very much for saving my child. You know, she is the only child. You know, sometimes I don't have words to say, but really, I'm very, very thankful for everybody. Everybody's helping us. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome to stay for a lovely meeting. You're welcome to do that. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Toro. I can't top that report, so I'm done.
Kyle, anything, okay, no, nothing.
Report, Kyle.
Mr. Bear, do you have anything for us this evening?
Sure. Some brief pieces. I wanted to note that we have a retirement, agenda item A under personnel, for Hannah Brodsky, our speech therapist over at JK. She's been in the district for 24 years. She's served every grade level in the district, and she's also served as a mentor to many of our new therapists. And according to her direct supervisor, Ms. Rizzo, she's also provided optimal services to a variety of special ed categories, and Lisa speaks very highly of her. So I miss Hannah, and I know the child study team will miss her as well. And the last piece, I just wanted to follow up on Christine Zimmerman's report from instructional, just to talk about the long-range plans related to the supervisors who were at the instructional meeting. World Languages is working on building the Chinese program. Social Studies is continuing in updating courses, making some courses a little more contemporary, and looking closer at 6 to 12 vertical articulation. Mathematics, they're working on building courses to accommodate our wide range of students, including enrichment opportunities as well as support. And lastly, we have our science program. I know we've reported about STEM. We're very excited about the building of that STEM program. It's pretty awesome. So as those programs continue to build, I'll report out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This evening, I just have a few items I'd like to let everyone know about. The Mahwah High School swim team defeated Garfield in the final home meet of the season. This year, the Mahwah swim team continued to make their mark as they entered their second year as a team. Both teams improved upon their win percentages from last year. The girls ended the season 4-10, and the boys earned a record of 5-9. And throughout the season, major milestones were reached, including 10 new school records, 8 of which were achieved at the Bergen County tournament. Next, the Thunderbird Winter Guard opens its 2016 season of competition, and we want to congratulate them, who opened the 2016 season with their first competition at West Orange High School on Sunday, January 31st. And last but not least, the boys bowling team takes the league title. The Mahwah High School bowling team secured the league title on Friday, January 21st by beating Dumont 7-0. So congratulations goes out to all those groups. Okay, at this time, we're asking if anyone has any board committee reports that they'd like to bring to the board right now. Yes, Doug.
Okay. Technology had a meeting. We're not ready to present yet. It's going through finance, a couple topics. But on March 2nd, there will be a presentation on technology. A lot of exciting information to share.
Great, thank you. I know, Christine, you went through the instruction and curriculum, which was great, and it was a wonderful meeting. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, all that you guys are doing.
It's juicy, right?
Yes, it was very juicy.
Are you okay? It's all right for me to ask that.
Yeah.
Right now we are.
Teach everybody about fog.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, good night.
We're asking for board member remarks and additional comments. Does anyone have any remarks or comments they'd like to say on this agenda? Anything? No? Yes or no? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to old business. We'd like minutes of the January 6th meeting. Yeah, have a motion, please, Doug. And Leslie, you want to go? Second?
Mr. D'Angelo.
Yes.
Mr. De Silva.
Abstain.
Mr. Denise.
Yes.
Mr. Gallo.
Yes.
Ms. Conica.
Yes.
Mr. Salderini.
Yes.
And Ms. Barrett.
Yes. And next we have the minutes of the January 20th meeting. Can I have a motion? Mike Gallo and Doug D'Angelo, second. Please step forward.
Mr. D'Angelo.
Yes.
Mr. De Silva.
Kyle, that's the one I need to abstain on. I vote yes for the 6th.
Mr. Denise.
Yes.
Mr. Gallo.
Yes.
Ms. Conica.
Yes.
Mr. Salderini.
Yes.
And Ms. Barrett.
Yes. Thank you. Now we're on to new business. And under new business, number 16, I'd like to take A through L, if I could. May I have a motion to proceed? Doug? And second, Rick. Thank you.
Mr. D'Angelo.
Yes.
Mr. De Silva.
Yes.
Mr. Denise.
Yes.
Mr. Gallo.
I will abstain on 16A, check numbers 080950 and 081042, and yes on all the remaining items.
Ms. Conica.
Abstain on 16A, check number 081002, and yes on all remaining items.
Mr. Salderini.
Yep.
And Ms. Barrett.
Yes. Next, we have new business personnel. I'd like to take 17A through F. I have a motion to proceed. Leslie Monto and Rick Silva, second.
Mr. D'Angelo.
Yes.
Mr. De Silva.
Yes.
Mr. Denise.
Yes.
Mr. Gallo.
Yes.
Ms. Conica.
Yes.
Mr. Salderini.
Yes.
And Ms. Barrett.
Yes. Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the floor to public questions or comments. And please note that this section of public participation will be limited to 15 minutes. Yes. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Debbie Lane, 43 Masonicus Road. First, I would really like to thank all the board members. I've been to many board meetings, just not in Mahwah. And I'm a retired teacher, actually, and I am so appreciative of the time that you give to make this district as great as it is. I started to compose a letter to send to you, and then I decided, you know, it's time for me to show my face around here. And I thought, if you don't mind, I'd like to read the letter to you publicly. I promise it will be brief. Mr. Salderini, I'm glad you're here. I'm
Maybe the first time I've ever heard that.
I was looking at the name, and I was looking at the name and the face.
Yeah, I want to just get that now.
It's on the tape, it's on the tape.
I'm so disappointed that our teachers are still working under an expired contract. These teachers are the biggest part of the district's success. Not a week goes by that I don't read or hear something positive about our schools, from sports to the arts to academics and of course test scores, today's record impact. Kudos to Mahwah High School. I could go on, but for the sake of time, I'll leave it at that because I'm sure you get my point. As you know, because of changes in the law, the board has not funded as much of the cost of the staff's health benefits as it had several years ago. This law was a great hardship to our teachers, custodians, and nurses. They actually bring home thousands of dollars less now than they did a few years ago. Fortunately, at this time, the law allows you to negotiate with the association and hopefully give some of the money back in order to reduce the staff's contribution to the cost of their health benefits. I know that you can't talk to the general public about many of the details on the table for negotiations, and I completely understand that. So I'm not going to ask a question. But I am going to urge you to be fair during the negotiating process. Please make our teachers a top financial priority. I'm sure you agree that they give us the biggest return for our money. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lockbow, 43 Thunderhead Place. I just wanted to ask about the long-range facilities plan and the capital reserve account. And I'd like to know, with the new board, if they are going to be updating the long-range facilities plan and giving information out to the public as to what projects are going to be on this wish list that you're gathering, because certain items cannot be covered with the capital reserve account because it has to be basically, you know, a capital project. So I'd like to know the time frame and when information will be dispensed to the public.
Great question. I'll take the second part, you'll take the first. Sound good? The second part is capital reserve projects. We reported probably a month or so ago, maybe 6 weeks, that we would be talking to the principals and asking the principals to put together some capital reserve projects, and they clearly understand the definition as does the board. And some things can fall into it and some things can't. The principals did spend a lot of thoughtful time putting together some pretty comprehensive lists for us. Kyle is in the process of working with Scott Vandermark, visiting all of the areas that the principals have noted. We're in the process of gathering information, what the cost looks like, so that on February 17th, in a meeting that Kyle has called for both of us to have with the Finance and Facility, we will talk about what Doug alluded to, which is a proposed technology initiative recommendation, because that'll fall under the budget. And then we're going to talk about those capital reserve projects and what our recommendations are moving forward, not only for what we feel we could accomplish this year as small improvements to our 6 buildings, but also what the summer will look like. That presentation will be made after it's vetted by the Finance and Facility at some point during March, which is typically when the budget presentations are made. Some are personnel, some are capital oriented. So as far as the timeline, February 17th for the Finance Committee. If they're good to go, then we will come out publicly with that list. It's important that we have committee support before we do that. So that's the second part of your question. The first part is Kyle, who knows more about that than I do.
With regard to the long-range facilities plan, and you had asked about updating it, and when we're going to update it. We update it whenever we have a capital project that we want to pursue that's not currently on it. It's one of the requirements of being able to transfer money from the capital reserve to a particular project, is that that project has a state project number associated with it. In order to get a state project number, it has to be on the long-range facilities plan. As far as doing a full look of the plan, that's something right now we're limited to and can't do because the software that the state uses to maintain it is currently undergoing an overhaul at down in Trenton. We've been told that it should be updated sometime this year. Once it is updated this year, then we go in and take a look back at the global long-range facilities plan. Right now, we just focus on the individual projects. Excuse me.
Okay, from a business and a financial standpoint, it makes sense for a school district to have a 5-year long-range plan that you can let the taxpayers know about what you are projecting to do within the next 5 years, regardless of whether the software program is capable of doing it or not. Just good business sense to have a 5-year plan and let the taxpayers know what we are going to be spending our tax money on. So I personally, whether the computer program works or not, there should be a 5-year long-range plan regarding what needs to be done with the facilities, what needs to be updated, what projects you're looking at. So I kind of find that not a great excuse that the computer program
I wouldn't
is not.
suggest, Mrs. Lockbauer, that Mr. Bleeker is trying to provide you an excuse. I think that the board members sitting here for some time, far longer than I have, could tell you that they have discussed projects that are going to be occurring in the future. For example, roof projects, and when they'll be replaced. You can't do all 6 buildings at once. Boilers and how old they are. We do have an exceptional supervisor of facilities who's so aware of each of our properties to be able to let us know what's going on. I think what you're looking for is a piece of paper that clearly says what we hope to do within 5 years, but the understanding of that capital project account is you need to understand that there are things too that happen that aren't part of that list, that we just need to take care of as well.
That's true, but as far as a goal and what projects, we would like to see as a district moving forward. So, for example, the capital reserve account, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for example, computers are not capital. But if we created a computer lab, the structures and fixtures in that computer lab, if it's a capital project, that would be included in the capital project.
You are correct.
Correct?
If we built a computer lab, if we ran lines, fiber lines for computers, that's all under capital reserve.
Right.
But the technology recommendation that we're looking to make, and as Doug alluded to, is not part of capital reserve.
Right.
That's correct.
So a laptop initiative is not a capital reserve.
That's correct.
But if we decided to put a science facility or a computer facility or a 3D printing facility or, some kind of technology facility, everything incorporated into that facility would be covered.
The electrical components of it, building of the walls and that kind of structure would be. Whether or not the computers, if we did a computer lab, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, just because we're building it doesn't mean that everything is inside falls under capital. So those computers would not be included.
Okay, just wanted to confirm. Okay, thank you.
I think when we have the report in from administration on what they're hearing from the building leaders, some of that stuff will undoubtedly get slotted out on a multi-year basis. So I think it'll move in the direction that you're looking to see, Evelyn, which is, because I'm just assuming that not 100% of what comes in on these building level things is, A, can be done all at once, and B, is desirable. That's a separate conversation. But I think you'll get what you're looking for in terms of at least a range of when these things can be considered. I think the project we have going on at the high school with the switchgear project is I'd have to go back and look, but I don't recall that one ever having come up from a long-range standpoint. I think we finally had an assessment in that said this thing probably needs to go, and they moved forward with the replacement of it. So just to put some context to that in terms of how it's going to get
We're heading in that direction,
essentially
Mrs.
laid out.
Lockbear, and I concur with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Any other comments?
Sue Dorsa, President, MEA. Kyle, I just have a question. Is there a limit on how much can be in the capital reserve account, or no?
There is a limit, and it's, can't exceed whatever amount is in the long-range facilities plan.
And how much do we have in there now? How much does the board have in there now?
For the capital reserve,
For the capital reserve.
just over $6 million.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you very much. Make a motion to adjourn, please. D'Angelo and Mike Gavin, second.
Thank you, everyone.